From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I will be on the boat, and hopefully we will help to bring change in this this violation of international law and this morally indefensible conduct by Israel.
Dozens of Americans are hoping to set sail this week on a ship in Athens, Greece, called the Audacity of Hope, attempting to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza and challenge Israel's embargo. They'll be joining a fleet of 10 ships with more than 1,000 people. We'll be joined by two of the passengers, New York labor lawyer Richard Levy and peace activist Kathy Kelly. They went to Harvard, Vanderbilt, and other American universities have to do with land grabs in Africa. A new report raises questions about their connection with European financial interests buying or leasing vast areas of African farmland. But first, Salon.com blogger Glenn Greenwald on how Obama rejected the recommendations of his top administration lawyers to continue America's war against Libya. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. NATO warplanes have bombed a home in a residential section of Tripoli, killing 9 civilians, including 2 babies. Libyan officials said another 18 people were injured. NATO admitted to carrying out the strike, but blamed the bombing on a, quote, weapons system failure. A Libyan government spokesperson described the NATO strike as a, quote, pathetic attempt to break the spirit of the people of Tripoli. Meanwhile, the New York Times has revealed President Obama rejected the views of top lawyers at the Pentagon and Justice Department when he decided he had the legal authority to continue the U.S. war in Libya without congressional authorization. The Pentagon General Counsel, Jed Johnson, and Caroline Krass, the acting head of the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, had told the White House that under the War Powers Resolution, Obama should have terminated or scaled back the mission after May 20th. The president has the legal authority to override such legal conclusions, but the Times reports it's extraordinarily rare for it to happen. In an interview on PBS NewsHour, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said he supported the president's view.
The War Powers Act has no application to what's going on in Libya.
None.
I don't believe so. You know, we did an authorization for Afghanistan. We did one for Iraq. But we have no troops on the ground there, and this thing's going to be over before you know it anyway, so I think it's not necessary.
We'll have more on this story after headlines. In news from Afghanistan, Defense Secretary Robert Gates has acknowledged for the first time the U.S. has been involved in preliminary talks with the Taliban to seek a political solution to the nearly decade-old war. Despite the start of the talks, Gates warned against a fast drawdown of U.S. troops.
My own view is that real reconciliation talks are not likely to be able to make any substantive headway until at least this winter. I think that the Taliban have to feel themselves under military pressure and begin to believe that they can't win before they're willing to have a serious conversation.
Top Iraqi officials claiming that as much as $18.7 billion of Iraqi money was lost by the United States during the first year of the U.S. occupation. A recent U.S. report put the amount unaccounted for at $6.6 billion. But Iraqi's parliament speaker, Osama al-Nujaifi, said the actual total is 3 times that. The Bush administration flew in a total of $20 billion in cash into the country in 2004, but nearly all of the money is unaccounted for. Meanwhile, a group of U.S. drilling companies, including Halliburton, stand to make tens of billions of dollars in Iraq under new oil deals. International oil companies have signed contracts with 4 largely American oil service companies to drill for oil and build wells. The 4 companies are Halliburton, Baker Hughes, Weatherford International, and Schlumberger. Mayors from cities across the United States are expected to approve a resolution today calling on Congress to end funding for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and spend the money at home instead. A group of 9 mayors signed off on the resolution Friday. The resolution states, quote, the United States Conference of Mayors calls on the U.S. Congress to bring these war dollars home to meet vital human needs, promote job creation, rebuild our infrastructure, aid municipal and state governments, and develop a new economy based upon renewable, sustainable energy. Massive flooding along the Missouri River has put 2 nuclear plants in Nebraska on alert. On Sunday, the Cooper Nuclear Station declared a low-level emergency as the Missouri River threatened to flood the nuclear plant. Authorities say the plant, which is about 70 miles south of Omaha, will have to close down if the river rises another 3 inches. Meanwhile, the Fort Calhoun nuclear plant, located about 20 miles north of Omaha, has been shut down since April 9th, in part due to flooding. In other nuclear news, a new expose by the Associated Press has revealed federal regulators have been working closely with the nuclear power industry to keep the nation's aging reactors operating within safety standards by repeatedly weakening those standards or simply failing to enforce them. Just last year, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission weakened the safety margin for acceptable radiation damage to reactor vessels for a second time. Tens of thousands of Spanish protesters marched Sunday in Madrid to protest high unemployment and bleak economic prospects. Other protests were held across Spain. The unemployment rate in Spain is now over 21%, the highest in the 17-nation Eurozone.
Politicians continue to ignore us. They keep saying we are protesting against the crisis because of unemployment. What we are protesting against is their attitude. We don't like it. They ignore us when we are out here on the streets. We have a clear message, but they water it down, manipulate it, and say other things. As they ignore us, we have to continue coming out here to see if they finally listen.
In Saudi Arabia, women have responded to social media calls to challenge the nation's ban on women driving by posting accounts and pictures of themselves behind the wheel. Online groups called for a day of defiance Friday, drawing over 150,000 Facebook supporters. Resistance to the conservative law was inspired in part by the recent arrest of 2 Saudi women who defy the ban. The activists argue they have a right to independence.
All we want to do is to have our needs met without depending on drivers. It is not out of love for driving or traffic or the experience. All this is about is that if I wanted to go to work, I can go. If I needed something, I can go and get it. And I think that society is ready to welcome us.
In a nationally televised address, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad vowed to begin a national dialogue on reform, but he blamed the recent popular uprising on saboteurs. Assad said no political solution is possible with people carrying weapons. Assad said, quote, "What is happening today has nothing to do with reform. It has to do with vandalism." The speech marked just the 3rd time Assad has addressed the country since the protests began in March. Rights groups say Assad's forces have killed at least 1,300 civilians since March. Syrian troops are now being accused of preventing civilians from crossing into Turkey to escape the state crackdown. In news from Pakistan, U.S. drone strikes in the Kurram tribal area have killed at least 7 people. Meanwhile, around 1,000 Pakistanis held a protest against drone strikes earlier today in North Waziristan. In other news from Pakistan, a 32-year-old journalist named Waqar Kiani has been badly beaten just days after he published an account of abduction and torture by suspected Pakistani intelligence agents. Kiani works for The Guardian newspaper. 3 weeks ago, another reporter, Salim Shahzad, was beaten to death after he wrote an article alleging links between Pakistani Navy officials and al-Qaeda. The Senate Intelligence Committee has begun a preliminary investigation into a report that the Bush White House asked the CIA to uncover damaging personal information on University of Michigan professor Juan Cole, a prominent critic of the Iraq War. Appearing on CNN, Juan Cole urged Attorney General Eric Holder to look into the spy operation.
And it's just impossible for me to believe that the White House asked the CIA to Google me, that they were just passing along publicly available information. There must have been an implication that they should actively dig up some kind of dirt. And that is illegal, and it's extremely troubling. And I believe that the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, should open investigations, should subpoena documents, should get names, should find out what was going on, who the request came from at the White House, what's the background of this.
A New York man who died last year after inhaling toxic debris following the collapse of the World Trade Center has been added to the list of official deaths resulting from the September 11th attacks. 63-year-old Jerry Borg's prolonged death from pulmonary sarcoidosis was ruled a homicide by New York City's medical examiner. Borg is the third person to be added to the list that did not die in 2001. A former Guatemalan military official has been arrested for his alleged involvement in hundreds of massacres during the early 80s. 81-year-old Hector Mario Lopez Fuentes is the highest-ranking Guatemalan official to be detained for the mass killings. The charges against him include genocide and forced disappearance. From 1960 to 1996, an estimated 200,000 people were killed and tens of thousands disappeared by the U.S.-backed governments of Guatemala. The United Nations has passed a historic resolution supporting the rights of gay, lesbian, and transgender people. For the first time in history, the UN Human Rights Council expressed grave concern for abuses carried out because of sexual orientation and called for a global panel and report on discrimination based on sexuality and gender identity. The United States voted in favor of the resolution. Opponents included Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. Firefighters are now battling wildfires in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. The Wallow Fire in Arizona is already considered the largest in state history. Meanwhile, Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona is facing criticism for his claim that the fire was started by undocumented immigrants. McCain claimed in a news conference that there was substantial evidence that the fire was caused by people who've crossed the border illegally. But the U.S. Forest Service dismissed McCain's claim, saying no such evidence exists. And the British peace activist Brian Haw has died at the age of 62. For the past decade, Haw lived and slept outside the Houses of Parliament in London to protest against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He began his protest in June 2001 to protest the Western sanctions against Iraq. He was a vocal critic of former British Prime Minister Tony Blair.
I voted for Mr. Tony Blair the first time, along with many people in my country. It was the big white hope, wasn't it? After Thatcher, the warmonger. And we hoped for something better, didn't we? I'm Christian Tony. I'm going to do right by everyone. Have you seen what he's done?
Again, Brian Haw, the peace activist, has died in Britain. To see my full interview with him, you can go to the website at democracynow.org. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.